Tom Craig, who became a client fairly recently and has had some pretty good successes out of the gates and came from a point of a little bit of fear and anxiety. Hey, welcome aboard, Tom.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Why don't you just tell everybody, you don't have to get it personal or anything, but kind of what because we're talking about money mindset, right? What your money mindset and your state around that was before you started working with us. And then a couple bullet points of the things you did and you could coach some of the people here to take on for themselves to make that transition.
I was never afraid of the money concept walking in. I've always been a $300,000 to $400,000 biller. And but my goal was actually hearing your testimony of how you build 2 million in 1 year. I thought I'd like to learn from that, because eventually, whether it's my own firm or it's me, I'd like to be billing $1 to $2 million per year. And I just launched out on my own here, and within the past, actually at the tail end of last year. And for me, it was just like going from a structured environment where I always had a boss that I could go to and pick their brain to being on my own. I was just like, didn't mind having somebody like yourself to be able to bank ideas off of and say, hey, am I off my rocker, or something to that effect. Coming in, it was just, you guys put a whole structure together, a whole framework together that I could work off of. And I think what's changed is that everything you guys have said here in the past half hour is phenomenal. For me, it's the mindset coaching that I think you said, what was it, like 80% mindset and 20% strategy? Is that what you said, Mike, or Francis? What do you do?
Yeah.
When you first said that, I doubted the statistic, but I don't doubt it anymore. Because when I went through the mindset mastery with Francis, as I went through that during Christmas time, that Christmas week when nobody was picking up the phone, for me at least, oh my goodness, huge epiphanies there. I'm just like, this is crazy stuff. And the stuff that she was talking about in there, I was just like, okay, I got to dig here. And then the books that you guys have recommended have caused me to dig even further. And what I've discovered is that, as Francis just said a few minutes ago, yeah, I've got that cap. I've got that cap and still struggling with it. Got to figure out how to overcome it. But I've discovered that, yeah, I've got that financial cap in my head, which appears to be around 400,000. And I need to work with my mindset coaches and figure out a way to how to overcome that. But right now, what's going on is through the mindset coaching and really learning to drink from the fire hose of information that you're providing through the various different sources that you provide. Your book is huge. Your book is massive. Going through the conference, going through your website, and then reading the book, and it's right there in front of me. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is everything I've already learned here. It's fantastic. I love it. That's what's going on right now.
And you made a shift. You pretty much have been a contingency recruiter, even billing at a high level. And you had beliefs around deposit-based search and retainers. And how did you cross that bridge, make that shift?
I've always known about retainers. I just didn't know how they worked. And when I heard the testimonies here at Recruiter Year about how you can switch from contingency to a recruiting firm, I was like, yes, that's me. And then, of course, talking with Beth Todd on the strategy side of it, her and I had talked about it. I'm just like, you know what? I'm going full retainer search firm. Eventually I've got to take your advice and figure out how to get to that point over a year or two. But one of the things that happened was shortly after the conference ended, I think this was back in late January, I had some of your material there, some of your guys' encouragement there. And I was talking with this guy that was having zero success on the contingency side. And so I just took the encouragement from your conferences and I'm like, hey, why don't we just do a retainer? You pay me a third up front, then you pay a third upon acceptance and a third when the guy starts. And he has sighed a sigh of relief and said, let's do it. Because the contingency side wasn't working for him, and he wasn't interested in going into another contingency search where he was going to get no resumes, nobody that qualified, and work with another contingency recruiter that had no motivation.
It's amazing. When I learned retainers, it was from somebody else who's like, step one is you ask, right? There's a process built into it, but it's about asking. And there is, especially in the market for the candidate short market we're in, and we continue to be in despite all the talk about a downturn, contingency works less and less predictably on the client side, but it's what they're used to. We could do money mindset, we could do mindset for clients, and their mindset's going to be, we've always done contingency. This is how we've always done it. And it requires a shift. What are the things, because like I said, you've just been with us for a couple months now and really got off to a really good start. What other advice would you give to people on things they can put in place to begin shifting the way they think, whether it's about retainers, whether it's about metrics, any points of resistance you might have had to those that you shifted and could help other people with?
Yeah, do the math. Honestly, do the math. That's what I had to do the math in the last 2 weeks here because Beth taught us saying you need to hire, you need to hire, you need to hire. And I'm like, when, why, where, how, all these questions, right? And then she gets off the phone with me and I'm like, all right, she keeps on talking about this. So she sends me this email on this math, right? I'm like, all right, that's your math. I'm going to do my math. Worked out to be the same numbers. And I'm like, okay, so I take the math and I go to my wife about it. We just talked about it just this morning before I jumped on this call. And I told her I told my wife what my plan was. And my wife, who was previously really close to the idea of hiring, she's now, that's a fantastic idea. That's exactly what you should do because we did the math. The math works out. It's not an expense, it's an investment.
So when you did the math, what did you, so as specific as you can be, because I know exactly what you're saying. And by the way, Beth Todd hit that he's referencing as one of our strategy coaches. He's been a client of ours for a decade now. And most of our strategy coaches are clients too. But when you did the math, what was the aha moment?
Was, okay, yeah, so I'm putting out anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 to hire somebody out there to be a recruiter for me, freeing me up time to go and pull in more retainers, okay? And then when I started doing the math on, okay, wait a second here. I need to hire actually this math was to be $1 million recruiting firm. I need to have one recruiter on staff that can put up 8 send outs per month. And I needed for me to have 8 send outs per week. That means that I basically need to have 4 recruiters there per week to be able to score the $1 million per year. And then of course, I think I netted out in that about 400,000 or 500,000 per year net for me, right? And I was like, this makes total sense right here. And so I even told my wife, I was like, wait a second here. If I bring on one recruiter at this expense right here, while we're gone on vacation, they're working for me. I can do these presentations while I'm on the road. They just placed that retainer for me and I've been off playing. I'm like, why not? And she got excited when I said that too. She goes, that's a great idea. That's exactly what you should do.
It's a brilliant way just to talk. I love how you just said it, do the math. But there's all the second and tertiary benefits of, because that's what I learned for myself was I would go away on vacation. The year I had a $2 million desk, meaning it was my clients, my client base. We did about 3 million as a firm, 2.1 million was from my client base. The rest was from recruiters that were full cycle. I went away for 2 weeks and I never called in and I never got called. And if anything, the number of first-time interviews on my desk went up while I was gone because I didn't get in the way. That's what's available to you, Tom. You'll find if you're like me, because we still have, nobody does it better than me. So we still cling a little too, I anyway, clinged a little too tightly. But when I realized that when I went away is I actually let even a little bit more go. And it's a journey. It's a process. You're going to stub your toe and not everyone you're going to hire is going to be perfect, but it's to what Kaito said, you just don't stop. I hired somebody and they didn't work out. Okay, so did IBM, but they grew a company. Like they hired a few people that didn't work out. Any questions and Francis, anything you wanted to
I would love to add, just thank you so much, Tom. I think you've been in the program about 2-3 months now at this point. Yeah. And it was so phenomenal. Your energy shifts in the fast start were so powerful, especially for your peers. And even here, what I wanted to touch on was like, can everyone feel his energy? When you were talking about retainers, I call it confidence without overcompensation, right? You're in this confident energy of this is why retainers are in your best interest, Mr. or Mrs. Client. Like one of the great things about mindset is once you see it for yourself, you're not like turning into a mindset coach for these potential clients, but you can see their limiting beliefs too. And then it helps you shift them. And I could just feel that in your energy. And then your energy about just do the math, right? Most people don't realize that the only difference in the body between fear and excitement is breath. It literally processes the same way in the body, fear and excitement. But fear, you're all in tension, right? Versus excitement, it's like riding a roller coaster. I've never done this before, but okay, this is exciting. You could feel you and your wife's like excitement when you had this aha moment, and right, all that resistance just melts away. Even though fear can be in the back seat, but there's that safety and breath to it. And I could just feel that as you were talking. So thank you so much for sharing all of that.
Yeah, and Francis, to add to that, you guys sent me a book. I don't know who actually sends stuff over there, but in the package that you sent me when I first started, there was Mike's book, and then there was this book on confidence. It's called The 4 C's, right?
Oh,
And
that's
the guy,
I'd love to hear your
Yeah.
perspective on that. Yeah.
that launched me into reading Mike's book. So they just sat on the shelf for a month because I was too busy doing anything else, right? And then about a month ago, I picked him up and I read the 4 C's, and I'm like, I got to read Mike's book now. I have no options. I'm budgeting the time in. I'm reading Mike's book. The analogy that he put in there was the difference between fear and confidence. And I will never forget it because it's so powerful, right? Because he's talking about these military guys going and throwing these grenades, and then you got to dive before it explodes. You don't get killed yourself, right? And then the author of the book basically says, I'm the only one in my group of guys here that were being honest and were admitting that they're scared. And so his sergeant said to him, the difference between fear and confidence is this: fear is wetting your pants. So you're actually peeing your pants before you go out and do what you got to do. Confidence is walking in the pee. So you pee your pants and then you go walk in the wet underwear, right? And I thought, that is perfect. So I told my bookkeeper that.
That's awesome.
And my gut feeling, Tom, is the reason you started with the 4 C's because it was a thinner book.
Yes, very true.
And the book is called The 4 C's. Priscilla put it in The 4 C's Formula by Dan Sullivan, one of my mentors. And it basically says, and I don't know if it was in this book, but the thing where confidence comes from is a process. One is not born confident.
Right.
We all have fears, right? They interview Medal of Honor winners from the service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines. And they're like, oh my God, such bravery. How did you do that without fear? And they're like, no, I was scared to death, but I did it anyway. Like a Medal of Honor winner they haven't documented one who didn't say he or she was afraid, right? They just, to Tom's point, they did it anyway. Now, and what happens is, I'll give you a quick summary since you brought it up, Tom, is the first C is commitment, right? And until you make a commitment, and what I said on Monday, quoting David Nagel, it's basically the same thing. Until you make a decision, nothing happens. Until you decide, when you're weighing all your options, nothing moves in your life. It's actually, that's one of the sources of overwhelm. Once you make a commitment, and a true commitment, meaning I'm not, to Kaito's point, I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to stop. You enter the phase, the second C is courage. Courage is where fear exists. So you make a commitment and you start taking action. And the further you leave your comfort zone from your ability, the more fear, you can feel it in your body. You feel it as anxiety. And that's where a lot of people stop. Is that, Tom, right? At that point of fear, like you have these conversations with retainers, and people can say things like, we've never paid a retainer before. And you have this nice juicy opening that you could just take on contingency. And it's, no, I'm going to risk losing the opening to get the money up front. And what happens is, he goes, as you stay in execution in that courage phase, you begin to develop the third C, which is capability. And you go back and forth mentally between courage and capability. And you actually go back and forth mentally between courage and commitment. Do I really still want to do this? But if it's a true commitment, something where you're not going to stop, you actually stay between that courage box and that capability box, and you go back and forth, and over time, and you've all done this in your lives. We do this with our clients sometimes. I'll have them do an exercise, 3 or 4 major life events where they actually went through the 4 C's, and you develop the capability. And once you develop the capability, you now have confidence in that capability. Once I learned that process, I just said, am I ready to make a commitment? Am I ready to decide? Because I'm not getting all this BS about, do I do it or don't I do it? Decide not to do it. Fine. Just totally say the timing's not right. I'm not going to do it now. Just be in 100% decision. Usually, and the people on what sucks now, Tom, is as you grow a company, you make this cultural, the people on my team will say to me, are you ready to commit? And then I'm it's, what am I waiting for? I'm just being a wuss here. What am I waiting for? We need to do this in our company. Yes, we're ready to commit. And think about it. There was a time everyone on this call was not a recruiter. You were something else, maybe even right out of college, but there was a time where none of you were recruiters. And if you think about the first marketing calls you made or the first recruiting calls that you made, the amount of fear that you struck, that is now second nature. Like talking to a candidate there's no fear that comes up when you're talking to a candidate, but you were worried about saying the wrong things, but you went through courage and capability. You can map this out. You can map those 4 boxes out in any major life event. You went to what Francis said yesterday about stacking evidence that you've already gone through these processes. So thanks for queuing me up on that, Tom. Anything that I didn't ask you that you feel is relevant based on helping people shift?
Pretty much covered. I can't emphasize the mindset part of it enough, because for me, that's been huge. I really feel like you guys are 100% correct on the mindset side. To be honest with you, Mike, when I signed up with this whole thing, I was going to give you 6 months. And I was just like, he's got 6 months. If I don't have 200,000 on the board at the end of 6 months, I'm done. I'm out. I can't do that anymore. Matter of fact, I'm putting you in my business plan from here on out for my budget, right? Because yesterday, when Priscilla called me yesterday, I said to her, Priscilla, I don't think this is a 6-month program. I don't know how this can work out in 6 months. She goes, no, it's a 3-year program. I'm like, that makes more sense, because I'm drinking from a fire hydrant right now. I can't possibly consume all this in 6 months. It's just not going to happen. And for me, I would say probably closer to 90 to 95% is mindset. I have so much mindset stuff that I personally have to overcome. Right now, half the battle is just realizing that it's there for me. That's what's going on. You see the excitement of realizing that it's there. Now I've got to work with the coaches to overcome the issues. And I truly believe that once I overcome those mindset issues, I'll have $1 million, $5 million, $10 million business. But I've got to overcome those issues first. So mindset is what I'm emphasizing.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate your time. We're going to go to Q&A. Tom, you're welcome to hang out with us. And the reason I'll just tell people, because we're going to talk about it tomorrow, this 6 months, is we used to do 1 year minimum, and then COVID hit and people didn't know if they were going to be alive in 7 months, right? So we said, all right, we're going to reduce the fear of commitment, but it is when we show you that whole model that I started showing you at the beginning of this call, you can't install all those things effectively in 6 months. We met Tom where he was at, where he was really good at business development, and he wanted to take that to another level. That's why Beth emphasized retainers and now is emphasizing hiring, because leveraging yourself, because to do 400,000, you have a gift in getting clients. The easy thing to teach is the part of getting candidates. Easier is probably easy, maybe too light of a word. All right. Thank you again, Tom. I really appreciate your help.